Hello YouTube and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about my car history. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for your support. If you're new here, this is the channel where I talk about my experiences with the Lotus Elise 111R and answer your questions. This question comes from Vic Rattlehead. What was your first car and the cars leading up to it, and what is your dream car? Vic, thank you so much for the question. So, let's go back in time. Long ago, when little Lost Lotus was only 16 years old, my first car was a 1989 Jeep Cherokee Limited. So it was a 4x4 with the 4-liter straight 6. As far as engine modifications, I think it got a K&N air filter and that was about it. And I painted the valve cover red. So that was about it there. In terms of other modifications, it had a 3-inch suspension lift. I had Rancho shocks all the way around. I had a Rancho steering stabilizer up front. And then I had a brush guard and safari rack on top of the car, each with KC lights. Altogether, there were 6 100-watt KC lights, I believe, on the vehicle. So it looked sort of like a safari urban command vehicle. It also had a 60-inch CB radio antenna and some kind of Cobra CB radio. Back then, cell phones, I believe I had a cell phone, but it really was for emergency use only. And my friends all had CB radios, and this was the middle of nowhere, Texas, in the mid to late 90s, and so CB radios were the cool thing to have. And I did a fair bit of off-roading and mudding, as we used to call it in Texas, which sort of prepared me for driving in the snow here in the Northeast. Not exactly, but kind of, sort of. My next vehicle was a 1994 Ford Explorer. I believe it also had a 4-liter 6, but it was a V6. It was not a 4-wheel drive version, but it did have a manual transmission, and so I learned to drive a manual transmission on a 94 Ford Explorer. After the Ford Explorer, I got my first real kind of sports car, performance car, and it was a 1995 Ford Mustang GT with the 5-liter V8. My first Mustang was red with the black interior, and it was the first car that I did really any kind of performance modifications to. I was either 16 or 17 years old, so I had a part-time job in school and during the summers, and so basically every dollar that I earned went in towards saving up to buy parts for the Mustang. I installed a Ford GT40 intake manifold on it. That was the tubular one. That was a little more interesting than the Cobra intake that a lot of people installed. As far as the exhaust, I had a catback Borla stainless steel exhaust system for it, which sounded really unbelievable at the time and looked great too. I really liked the Borla exhaust still to this day. I had subframe connectors on the car. I kept the stock wheels, and I guess that was about it as far as modifications go. I had originally planned to install the twisted wedge stage 1 aluminum cylinder heads on the car, but I believe I got a speeding ticket when I was young, going far too fast, and my parents were quite upset with me, and in order to get them to be less upset with me, I agreed to sell the aluminum heads before I even had a chance to have them installed. Altogether, it was probably the right decision, but it was still kind of a bummer to never get to drive the car with the high-performance heads. After I crashed that 95 Mustang the first time, I ended up buying a 1996 Ford Mustang Cobra. That was a really fantastic car. The 96 had the 4.6-liter with the dual overhead cam engine, and gave me the first taste of what a non-pushrod engine could be like. It was a really great experience to get some familiarity with an engine that was higher revving, didn't quite have the down-low torque that the 5-liter had, but was really a far more interesting engine and a more fun car to drive. I really liked the 96 Cobra. It was really a great all-around car, and that's where I started to learn to, actually be a reasonably good driver. I was still pretty young. I had the 96 Cobra was the car that I had in college, And so I had that from about the age of 19 or 20 to 22. I drove it all through college. So when I finished college in Texas back in 2002, I decided I was going to move to Boston. And at first I didn't even think I was going to take a car, but then decided, well, I will let my family have the 96 Cobra back since I'm not going to be driving too much, and I will take the 95 Mustang GT to Boston. And so that's what I did. I drove the Mustang GT to Boston and had it here for about a year. When I crashed it a second time, really wasn't my fault either time, but the second time was too much and the car was totaled, and that was when I said goodbye to my 95 Mustang GT. After about a year of not having a car in Boston, I decided, okay, it was time to try again. I bought a 2000 Jeep Cherokee Sport. So it was essentially just a slightly newer version of my very first car. It was great for Boston in the winter and a really fun car to drive. But I was working downtown and living downtown at the time. And so I really, as much as I liked it, I really didn't need it. And so I sold it after owning it for about a year and then went back to not having a car. A few years go by and I was running a business and decided it was time to have a car again. And so the worst car decision of my entire life happened. And I can't remember the model year. I think it was around 2005, but I'm not certain on this. It may have been in 03 or 04, but I had a Land Rover Freelander. So this was my first foray into British cars. And the Land Rover Freelander, while it was a great car when it ran, had just about a 100% engine failure rate for the V6 gas engine. That was the only one really offered in the United States. I know there was a diesel version offered in Europe, but the diesel version wasn't offered here, I don't think. And so that engine had a terrible, catastrophic design flaw that caused all of them to fail after about 50,000 miles or so. And that's why you almost never see them today, and you almost never see them for sale. A very modern car that was great in all kinds of ways just sort of ceased to exist because there are no replacement engines and really no way to fix them outside of an engine swap. So that car cratered and I ended up dumping it, and to replace it I went back to a Mustang. And so I bought a 2008 Ford Mustang V6. And the Mustang is the car that I had when I first bought the Lotus Elise. It's interesting because the 08 Mustang was really a significantly better car than either the 96 Cobra or the 95 GT. The 4-liter 6 in the Mustang was actually really quite torquey and quite powerful. It was just about as powerful as the 5-liter that was in my 95 GT. Not as smooth, and doesn't have quite the torque, but it was close. The Cobra was more fun for sure, but the chassis overall on the 08 Mustang, even the V6, I think was better than the 96 Cobra. I had basically gotten away from cars for a few years because I didn't have the money to pursue them, but the Lotus Elise had always been on my list and something that I really wanted. I thought at first that it would be a car that I would be able to daily drive. That certainly turned out not to be the case, but I don't regret buying it for a second. The Mustang had a few issues and I wasn't really enjoying it very much, so I decided, okay, I'm going to need a daily driver, but I don't really want it to be the Mustang anymore. I want to try something else and have another new experience. And so that is where we are right now. We are in my 2012 Fiat 500 Pop. I did one other video way back for the OG subscribers, 3 months ago, that features the Fiat. And so this is the car that I bought after the Lotus Elise, and I still have the Lotus Elise, of course. But when I'm not driving the Lotus, I'm driving the Fiat. The only trouble with the Fiat is while I really, really enjoy driving it, it's a Fiat, and it has all the problems that Fiats have in terms of it being a Fiat. I bought this car last September for about $9,000. It's just about fully loaded. It doesn't have a leather interior, but it has this two-tone red and black interior. It has the sunroof. It has the Bose stereo. It's a really great car to drive, and I really enjoy it. It's actually a lot of fun. I like that it's also really small and light. It's very maneuverable. It's got a little body roll. I like how economical it is, and it really is a lot of fun to drive. My problem is that the amount of money I've spent in repairs this year is getting to be a little out of control. Just in the last 2 months, I've had to replace the starter and the alternator. It also needed a tune-up, and now it has an exhaust leak. And so it's about to go back in the shop. In the last 2 months, I've spent almost $2,000 on repairs for the car. The car was only $9,000 when I bought it, and it's probably worth about $7,000 now. And so spending $2,000 on a car that's only worth $7,000 is a little bit painful. Now that it has an exhaust leak, we're not exactly sure what's causing it, but you know, I don't know. I'm prepared to spend another $500, another $1,000 to get that fixed. And so it's a really great car that I really enjoy, and I don't want to get rid of it. But if there's anything else, if it needs more than another $1,000 worth of repair work in the next year, I may have to look at trading this in towards something else, maybe something more reliable like another Lotus. So that's my car history. Now on this channel, we like to leave our comments down in the area below us. If you have a car history that's interesting you want to share with the channel, hop on down, leave a comment, and let us know what your car history was, especially if it led to eventually buying a Lotus.